Every year, approximately 2 in 5 Americans are unexpectedly thrust into the role of caregivers for an aging parent or a family member. 70% are completely unprepared. And whether it's the normal aging process, a sudden fall, or a debilitating illness, you can suddenly be pulled into a crisis of caring for an elderly parent or a loved one. Now, being a caregiver for someone you dearly love or feel responsible for is a daunting experience. You can quickly feel overwhelmed by the emotional, physical, and psychological aspects. Where and how do you start? What do you need to know? How do you make the right decisions, and who can help you? My guest today is Barbara Applegate. She's worked with adult children and aging parents for nearly 4 decades as a geriatric care manager and social worker. She holds a master's of social work and a postmaster's certificate in gerontology, and she has also served on the National Council on Aging Board. She's written an Amazon International bestseller, which is the definitive guide to providing effective, loving care for an aging parent. And today, she's going to share with you this most important issue. Aging population that is exploding. The burden is going to fall on the adult children to take care of their aging parents and family members. This is an episode you don't want to miss if you've got parents or elderly family members that you love. So stay tuned, because this is an episode you won't forget. Hello, and welcome to Hero Up, the podcast that inspires and challenges you to step up and become heroic in all areas of your life. I'm your host, Tony Stark Polici, and it's my goal to give you practical, actionable advice and insights into copywriting, mindset, lifestyle, and impact. On this show, we'll explore how to create compelling and persuasive marketing messages, and I'll give you clever tips to make you stand out as a hero. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a freelancer, a coach, or a creative, this podcast is for you. So, let's dive in. Welcome to this episode. I'm really excited today because I get to interview an amazing woman, Barbara Applegate. Barbara is an author of an amazing book that I had the honor of working on with my lovely wife, Donna, and it's called The Compassionate Journey. And Barbara, thank you so much for being here with me to do this interview today.
You're more than welcome, and thank you for the lovely introduction. I appreciate that.
So, Barbara, you have been in the business of geriatric care management and working with caregivers and educating people for many, many years. And I want to know, what inspired you to write A Compassionate Journey at this stage of your career after all these decades of experience in elder care?
Well, I just believe it's getting harder for people to coordinate the care of the elderly. The resources are limited. The understanding and the complication of how to access resources becomes less available to people without having some guidance. We're having more and more elderly people needing help, and there's less and less of people like me that are out there helping, especially our caregivers. That's a group of people that we have seen diminish in their numbers. And the reason for that, from the point of COVID to now, is because they found other alternatives, that they didn't have to comply with all the rules and regulations and still not be able to earn a wholesome living. So we're looking at, how do you help somebody start with your elderly person? And I kind of looked at what was going on with the phone calls I was getting and realized I could be on this phone forever, all my staff, and we're still not going to really help people in the volume that is needed. How do we help people get started with taking care of their elderly? So I decided, it's time. It's time to put down in writing, step by step, all the things that we do when we get that first phone call. And I'm hoping that people will understand that they don't have to do it alone. The book is clear about that. You do not have to do this alone. You should actively engage your parents' family, your family, friends, and services that are in the community. But there has to be a starting point, and there has to be a coordinator. And so I don't know how else to get that message across to the volumes of people that need this information now. So I just poured my heart out and put it in a book. This is what you got in that book, is what we do. This is what we do. This is how we start with your aging person and what we do from the beginning to the end. The kinds of points that we have to deal with them, how to help even your elderly person understand it's okay to have help. That's one of the hardest things that we all have to work towards is how can you help the family accept that they need help, but how can you help the elderly person accept that they need help? And what we've discovered is that somebody that's not a child can get more work done in that arena than the child, but we can bring them along and then just gently transfer that role of them being the caregiver, the primary caregiver. So these are the things that really made me say it's time to educate families, friends, and community on how to be responsible to assure that that elderly person is getting the attention that they need, not letting them fall through the cracks until it's too late.
Oh, that's amazing. I know the first time that I looked at the manuscript, I really identified with it from personal experience with my own father and with my mother-in-law. And both my wife and I said the same thing, as well as many other people that I've talked to who've read the book. Wow, where was this? I wish I would have had this book 10 years ago or 5 years ago, whenever. I know firsthand the great information that's in there, but you describe caregiving as a daunting and often overwhelming task. Can you share about the most significant challenges that people face today and maybe how your book helps them manage these things?
Yeah, I touched on it very briefly. I believe that it's complicated. It's a very complicated shift from child to parent, to change roles. And when we start trying to do that, there's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of anger. They just don't want to bother their children. They don't want their children to feel like they have to now live their lives with taking care of them. There's also a flip side to that. Their children are basically saying, I've got enough help and enough to do. Now I have to add a caregiving role for my parents. I feel like I'm a sandwich. I'm squeezed between my children and my family. How do I handle all this? It's very completely stressful for many people. The cost, they start looking at what they may have to be doing, and the cost and the willingness to pay for that care isn't always available to the child, to the elderly adult who's taking care of their parent. And even if there is funds that their parent can offer, they may not want to release it. They've got a mental sense of, no, that money is for you. That money is for my grandkids. I'm not spending it on me. You don't need to have this kind of help to take care of me. You can do it. There's that battle of how do we get through just even that very simple, you got the money, you got the help, we got the resources, and now you're saying you want to save it for us. And we're saying, please don't. You're saving us by letting us use those funds for you. The other thing is overseeing. This is very daunting. Overseeing the coordination of care of your elderly parent when geographically you're located thousands of miles away.
Yes.
How do you do this? Who do you trust? What do you have to do in order to get things put together? Does one of you or do one of you have to come in on a routine basis? The way that economy is going right now, that's a little risky to think that it's okay to come into town, every couple of months and then have one of your siblings do that. Not everybody can afford it and is willing to do it. It's too life-changing. So without knowing who's got the boots on the ground where your parent is living, becomes very, very complicated to do all the things that book is guiding you to do. You can't. You just can't. You just get in here, be with your parent, get it all set up, and periodically come back and check it out if you can. And if you can't, you need to make sure that you have developed an ally that can help you with that when you're not physically available. That ally can be friends, If you've got a good communication system going, it can be their community from their spiritual base, their church, their groups. But the bottom line is what we've all learned is that nobody is static. It's going to change. Everything is going to change. And so somebody still has to be on top of the changes that might be occurring subtly with your parents. So again, I would encourage a family member to set up an arrangement with a professional who can go in and check and see and communicate back and forth what the system that you've put in place is doing, and are they doing what needs to be done?
So the book walks them through first steps and systems and options and all of that.
The book actually walks you through what I would do. What if you called me and said, I'm getting a strange feeling about what's going on with mom and dad? They ask me the same questions. They avoid answering questions. I'm getting phone calls from friends saying, you better get out here. Mom is doing some funny things. So if they can't get out here, they'll call me and then I will go visit. And the first thing that either they have to do when they come to visit or I need to do is to scope out what is current, what is happening in the here and now. Not what happened, not what's going to happen, but what is happening right now. So you look at the environment. The environment will tell you volumes of information about how your parent is functioning. Their physical presence will tell you how your parent is functioning or not functioning. The questions that need to be asked on how their cognitive functioning, their thinking. Are they taking their medication? What if they haven't gone to the doctor for a long time and there are now very prevailing symptoms of illness that need to be addressed? So in my first chapter, I'm really saying, look, the hardest thing to understand is that your parent is no longer who they were, it's who they are. And who they are now may be a little different because they may have cognitive issues, cognitive impairment issues. And so I go through some of the kinds of impairments that if they read it and they're looking and observing, they can document. Is that what's happening? I always say you have to go to the doctor. You have to bring that physician on board so that we know that they're on the right medication and that they're taking it. And it's one thing to say, well, they're just depressed and all they need is an antidepressant. And what they actually are, yes, they probably are depressed, but what they actually are is cognitively declining. And with that comes more care and more concern about what kinds of medications they need. Are they taking the proper medications and are they taking their medications willingly and timely? So those are the kinds of things in that first chapter I'm saying here. I'm giving you some outlines. Fill them in. Go see your parent's doctor with your parent. Don't take away your parent's right to talk to that doctor because that will make your life harder to get in there and help. But when you go with them to the doctor, you sit with her or him in the doctor's office and he's going to ask questions. And when the questions are off kilter or the answers are off kilter, you can always say, look, the last time we talked about this, or this is what I saw, Dr. So-and-so, usurping authority of the elderly person, but you're helping. And that's your first steps, is to get the doctor on board, to make sure he knows how to help your mother or father with the right medication. Now, if it turns out that it is just depression, there is right medication for that. If it turns out that it's Parkinson's, or if it's Alzheimer's, or if it's vascular dementia, he's going to find all these things out with your help and your observations that you've recorded and are sharing with him. And then you can get your parent on the right path for care.
Got it. So for those of you listening right now, you can actually get the first chapter of Barb's book actually for free by just going to acompassionatejourney.com, and you'll be able to actually download the first chapter of this book, which is extremely helpful. Of course, you can get the book there too, but that's acompassionatejourney.com. You can actually see what Barbara's been talking about here. And Barbara, I want to ask you about, there's this term that I just became acquainted with in the last couple of years called silver tsunami,
Yes.
which describes this looming elder care crisis. Can you describe what that is and why families are so unprepared for this?
Well, when you stop and think about the weather and you think about a tsunami, you get very little warning. And when a tsunami occurs, it is a huge wave that washes over the whole community and it brings back into the ocean the debris. And what it also leaves behind is a lot of debris, a lot of stuff that, you're wondering, what are we going to do with all this now? So back in the early 2000s, we all started looking at, oh my goodness, aging is exploding. We are now looking at people that are 65 plus. From 2022, there was 51 million elderly over 65. They're really expecting that by 2050, which for many of you is a livable time frame for you, there'll be at least 82 million elderly.
Wow.
So that is what we're calling a tsunami. It's a wave of elderly that are coming in and crashing down onto the communities, onto families, onto the healthcare system, that are now, as the settlement of the wave the reality of it has occurred. Now everybody's looking at it and saying, whoa, what do we do? There's a lot to be done here. So that's it's not quite a 50% increase from 2022 to 2050.
And we haven't seen the worst of it yet, right? It's going to continue and it's going to come at a more rapid and intense rate.
I believe it is. I really do. The last of the baby boomers are going to come in around that hit 65. And that's going to bring us about 18 million new elderly. And actually, older adults will outnumber kids. That's never happened before in the U.S. history. There will be more elderly people than there are kids.
Wow.
So how do you cope with all of that? How do you, when you say you feel like you're right in the middle of taking care of your own family, your own needs, and now the elderly, it is a generation that is compressed into a sandwich, so to speak. Worldwide, we're having a phenomenal growth in elderly people. It's closer to 750 million people now, and by 2050, it will be closer to 160 billion elderly.
Those numbers they're mind-boggling to try and think about that. And one of the things that I've heard from my talks with you that I've learned is that the caregiving industry is completely unprepared to handle these numbers. That even if they wanted to, and even if everyone could afford that help, that there's way too many people aging for the system to even handle. So this is going to fall on their adult children, the responsibility, even if for just a temporary time. Is that accurate?
Yes. And I think it's going to fall on the community. The community must buy into the fact that they have a prized group of people right now that they're not even bringing to the table to talk about what are we going to do for healthcare needs. They've kind of pushed them aside from the table with other professionals now. Problem solving, how do we take care of the healthcare needs since we have limited healthcare issues, treating the elderly as though, well, you're going to consume too much and we can't afford to have you consume all that healthcare. The elderly consumes a large portion of healthcare in their end stages. So it's a recalculating the thinking of the community. First of all, we have to eliminate in any way we can the concept of ageism. We have to look at the elderly as though they're a prized possession for our community, and they're people that have much to offer if we give them the support and the help. Most of the elderly provide some sort of financing for their families. Most of the elderly will help with taking care of children while their own children are working. Many of the elderly have wisdom that we just have ignored. And it's tragic because they've gone through a lot of crises in their many years, and they found ways to problem solve getting through these crises. And so we want that wisdom to be a part of the problem solving at that table with the new and the young and the old.
You know, one of the things that I think about is really over the last 40 years, the generations over the last 4 decades have not endured the kinds of crises that their parents endured. You know, world wars and so many, back-to-back things that really caused trauma and devastation. And we've really had it relatively good lives over the last 20, 30 years. Now, I know some people would hear that and say, well, that wasn't my experience. But, I think if we look historically into what these elderly people have experienced, their life experience, as you just alluded to, versus what the generations that are going to be responsible for caring for them have, it's kind of a night and day difference. And I wonder if the reason that so many people are unprepared for this to take care of the elderly, and if maybe they dismiss them or don't even think about them, is the industry of caregiving itself has become sort of commonplace. People know it's there. They think, well, there's caregivers, there's old folks home, right? Senior care living, and those are popping up everywhere. I'm seeing them all over the place. But I wonder if there's just this general sense in the back of people's minds that, oh yeah, whenever that happens, there's resources for that.
Well, up until I think the COVID crises, there actually were caregivers that could be better counted on. But that crisis created a tremendous awareness for everybody. First of all, they themselves were decimated as a population. Many, many, many sick people, and they just don't want to go back into that level of stress. We've never really experienced a depression like our elderly have experienced. The 1930s was a crushing blow. These are the people that found a way through.
Right.
And they could give us a lot of information on how to be more productive, how to save, the kind of health care that they're looking for. Sometimes the old folks' health care remedies are now being considered as having some value. They're not so quick to get treatments back then, and they actually built up a resistance. And now, you cough and you get an antibiotic slapped on you. Well, now they're starting to realize that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's really a problem. But I also think that housing was different. Neighborhoods were different. There were always problems in obtaining housing. There was always problems in living in mixed neighborhoods. But there doesn't seem to be any less problems now, when you would expect that, we would have come to some awarenesses of how to make life better for that elderly person and safer for that elderly person. We're housing them in a facility, a multi-story facility, is not normal. It's not a normal lifestyle. They don't have their families around them. They're kind of almost in, I don't want to use the term because I know people will say, what are you, nuts? But it's almost like a ghetto. You're caught in a similar, everybody around you is similar. And so I have found that while communities are starting to address that, they're blending child care facilities with assisted living facilities, and they're having grandparent days. Great. That's great. There's not enough of it, but that's what they're doing. Removing people from their homes prematurely is a mistake because it gives them no base, no footing to build on. Every time they build a little network of friends, somebody has succumbed to their age. The familiarity of the neighborhood. is not there. The ease and the joy of walking up and down the street is not there. They're trying to create all those things in these facilities. I know that there are some places in Europe that have said, okay, let's just manufacture a complete little town where there's housing, where there's stores, where there's banking, where there's recreation, where there's supports for legal systems. We haven't come to that yet here. We should, but we haven't. And I think, they're finding that bits and pieces of that is good. And you'll come to a facility and you'll see on their first floor, they'll duplicate like a little post office, shopping store, couple of restaurants, that kind of thing. But really, tell me, would you want to live there? Is that how you would want to see your life evolving to, when you could be in your home or you could be in your community? So I'm really asking for everybody to look at their communities and request their communities to start being more creative on how they can support the people that are living in their community. Volunteer programs, food programs, transportation programs that are all viable and can work. I think a lot of people are trying that in various cities, but we need to have a buy-in. We just need to have a buy-in from all of us that these elderly people are treasures, and you're treasures with care.
Right.
Careful care.
What you're saying really starts with awareness. And my hope is that your book, will be a resource to help bring some of that awareness to the masses. Because if people don't even know that this is an issue, something they need to be paying attention to, then they're not going to pay attention to it. And one of my judgments, in the past has been, well, people just don't care. They're too self-centered. But that may not be the sum truth of the whole thing. It's just maybe just a lack of awareness. But you talked about this approach, which you mentioned in the book. The examples you just gave are more of a holistic approach to caregiving. So you talk about that very specifically in the book. What are some of the key areas where families may not pay attention to a holistic approach and where they would struggle that really need to be paid attention to?
Well, I think the first thing is you need to get acquainted with your parent. You need to learn about them. They are not the same people that raised you. And when you left, they continued to evolve just like you did. And as they evolve, what we're discovering that more individuals that are coming of age are starting to look more at their spirituality. What is important to me? What has always been important? What have I done with my life? Where am I going now? How do I make my life better? And how do you know that unless you talk to your parent about that? But you can't impose what you want them to think and what spirituality you may have, because you may be going through the same thing, but you may not be at the same place, and you may have very divergent conclusions. Our goal, as anybody who cares about another person, we need to understand what is important to you. It doesn't have to be religion. I don't think spirituality and religion are hand in hand. I do think religion gives you the doctrine and the rules and the guidelines on how to be a better person based on your belief system. But spirituality goes deeper in different ways. It's really looking at your world from a place of, who am I? What do I want? Who are you? How can I help you? How can I give you what you need? Can I? Do I even want to? What's my role as a human person to another human person? This is a little aside, but I've been watching on TV the sadness of the dogs and cats that are just being abandoned because they can't. I don't know why. I really don't know why, but they're just being abandoned. The lack of caring for, a creature that is vulnerable. I don't get it. I just don't get it. And then I expand that observation to seeing people in these large groups, facilities. They do some fun things, some wonderful things, but it's not their family. So we have to add those wonderful things, their family, however we can. It's not that it's based on religion, but are they offering them the kinds of experiences and the kinds of contacts and events that really build from inside out? What gives them their happiness, their comfort, and their peace of mind? We're getting old. I am. As my illustrious friend pointed out, I just celebrated a pretty major birthday.
Mm.
And the one thing that I thought about was, with whatever time I have, what do I want to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
How do I want this time to have value, not for just me, but for the people I care about, for the country that I care about, for those little kids that are now running around as my grandchildren, great grandchildren. What can I be doing to make their lives, along with my lives, better? And I think that's the wisdom that comes with the elderly. And that's very much blending their belief systems into a future. If you know what that is, if they are open and willing to talk about it with you, you may not like what they're saying. But that's not up to you to decide if they're right or wrong. It's up to them to decide what they're thinking and what they want and what they think is right or wrong. Your role as a caregiver, family member, is to be an active listener. Ask questions. See if there's something that you may garner from what they're telling you that will then make your job a little easier to take care of.
Are there any examples of how your book provides guidance for people to maybe step into some of these ways of being that they're not accustomed to? A person may have a very dogmatic approach to beliefs or something like that, and they hear their parent saying something that they completely disagree with, and they'll have a reaction to that rather than, being able to listen and process that and respond in a way that is beneficial.
We're all human beings, and we all have our beliefs and our emotions, and our reactions, and our stress levels and how we're coping. And to have any of that rattled by somebody who now we have to bring into our world with understanding, I just think we're all human beings and we're not going to do it perfectly. Yeah. The only thing that I think we have to remember is there are spiritual people out there that we can tap. There are religious groups that can talk with us and our parent. There are counselors that can talk with us and our parent. If you're finding that, they're buying into a religion that you just never thought they would, well, is it harmful to them? That's the key. Is it harming them? Is that what your worry is? Or is it just that now you can't have a common pathway with your parent? That's harming you. So if it's harming you, you're the one that needs to have some support and some understanding in order to build that bridge back with your parent. Building a bridge doesn't mean that you're going to change them. That's not our goal. If they have peace of mind and it's different than what you want them to have in terms of their belief system, you have to find your peace of mind in that. And I would have you seek your religious groups that can help you with that. And I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but...
Well, yeah, that's really good counsel because, sometimes people would overlook the obvious fact that if I don't know what to do about this situation and I don't have the expertise, who does have that expertise? Who does have that knowledge that I can now go find and talk to and get some guidance? So in addition to the aspect of focusing on the spiritual well-being, your book also has this unique approach of focusing on the emotional well-being.
Oh, yeah.
And why is it crucial for both caregivers and, even the aging parent or loved one to address that aspect of their care?
Well, first of all, emotion and mental illness are not hand in hand as you age, but they're parallel. There are lots of people who have lived their whole life without getting any help for their emotional state. They've found ways to accommodate, and as they get older, it's getting harder and harder to do that. And so you start seeing the veneer peeling. And if that's something that is happening, I think it's critical to help them get the kind of support that they're not going to do reconstructive therapy. What they are going to do is comfort counseling, comfort therapy, letting them talk. I just had a client who I said, oh my goodness, he's having all kinds of troubles and there's this negative influence around him. What are we going to do? I'm talking to a behavioral neurologist, and he said, Barbara, do you just go and sit and talk with him? And I said, no, I don't. I'm real task oriented. And he said, no, 1 hour a week. I want you to go. I don't want you to say anything. Just let him talk. Let him express what's going on in his own inner world. Eventually what will come out is you will see how you can help him. If it's depression and he doesn't want to believe it's depression, he'll talk all around it, but as long as somebody is listening to him, it will eventually come out. I think it needs to be done this way. And he said, the more people that have the knowledge to do that, the better it is for the elderly. But it's just absolutely needed to have somebody sit and just spend time with them, listen, don't judge. It's too easy to judge. Don't quickly try to diagnose. Too easy to diagnose because we have people who have such a deep history, and to try to hit the surface with the diagnosis doesn't always work.
Right.
If they have trauma and they've camouflaged that trauma for years and years and years, and as they're coming to their end, they're looking at all of their life and they're doing a review. Listen to their review. Listen to their stories. I think emotionally, that's the kindest and healthiest thing you can do for someone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So you also mention in the book, and this is something that I alluded to in the beginning of our interview today, when we talked about the silver tsunami, is that many caregivers find themselves in that position accidentally. So they're super unprepared for the role. My recommendation to anybody, is first of all, get Barbara's book, because when they're buying your book, they're getting you. It's like they now have you there in the palm of their hand and a guide who can walk them through all these things. But what advice do you have for someone who suddenly finds themselves in this position? Say, for example, everything's going fine. Mom or dad or the elderly loved one, maybe it's even a neighbor. Everything's going great. And then suddenly they have an accident, they have a fall, or they come down with something and they need care. Like, what do you tell somebody who finds himself in that position?
Well, the first thing is that go find their advanced directives. Make sure they have advanced directives. If they don't, your hands are tied. You need to get advanced directives. Now, in this state, in Arizona, we have the surrogacy law, where if they don't have advanced directives, that is assigned to an order, spouse, domestic partner, children. It just goes down the line, but it has its limitations on what you can do when you're using a authority that they have not assigned to you intentionally. So I think you definitely, if they're in the hospital, you definitely need to get that social worker to help you write up a medical power of attorney. You need to sit down with your parents' attorney and say, look, do they have a financial power of attorney? Are they capable of doing that? And we probably need to do that with its contingencies that go around financial powers of attorney, because that's the most dangerous document anybody can give to another person, because it just says, yeah, you've got access to my money now. So do you really need that? Yes. Do you really need that without having some caveats put in? No, you don't. Do they have a living will? I mean, what happened? Not a will for their estate, but a living will. What happens if they get into a situation where now they're pretty damaged and they have some rules that they want people to follow in taking care of them? They haven't done that. And if you haven't had that done yet, and there hasn't been this major crises, that is the first thing I tell everybody to do when I go in there is, where's your advanced directives? Do you have a living will? Do you have somebody that you've assigned to take care of your estate? Do you have an attorney? Do you have a list of the doctors that you are seeing? Do you have a list of your medications that you are taking? Do you have a area for your mortgage, for your financial affairs? What kind of insurance do you have? Sometimes it's a little too late to get long-term care insurance, but I'll tell you what's really tragic is if you have long-term insurance and nobody knows using it. So these accidents, while they're accidents, are opportunities. You need to get these documents and this information gathered as quickly as possible. If you haven't, and you're listening to me now, may I suggest you run to the nearest store, get your paperwork so that you can get this information and know where it's going to be in case this accident does occur. Talk to your parent's doctor, get permission to talk to your parent's attorney with your parent there, the financial person with your parent there, so that you're not in the dark. Health-wise, a crisis has a formula. If you broke a leg, there's a triage. You put your parent into a hospital, and then there's the triage and all the things that need and can be done. And there's a whole group of healthcare professionals during that time that can guide you. But what about when they're discharging them? Who's going to be there to follow that? You have to have somebody significantly that you can trust to coordinate that care in terms of the discharge follow-up, getting the medications, because there'll probably be new medications. If you're 2,000, 3,000 miles away, who are you going to turn to here that you can get that taken care of? If a sibling is here and it hasn't been responsive, what makes you think they're going to be responsive now? What do you have to ask them to do to become responsive? And if they just can't do it from whatever their relationship is with their parent, it doesn't mean that then it can't get done. Of course it can. You just have to go to the next level of people that care about your parent and engage them in helping.
That's super specific, great counsel right there. And again, I know that your book provides detailed questionnaires and assessments to help the families plan this care and to figure these things out. You've got like step by step what the priorities are. So if you're listening to this and you're like, how am I going to remember all this? The best resource that, I can tell you is just get a copy of the book. But Barbara, I know that you've said that this book is really, it's you. You've taken it from all of your work. When you sat down to develop these questionnaires and these assessments and all of these tools, how did you do it? What was the process? Did you kind of create your own like standard operating procedures for how do I approach an individual and then just translate that into actual tools in the book?
No, a lot of my tools come from the profession, from a variety of professions, from physical therapists, from occupational therapists, from psychologists, from geriatric care managers. I guess I'd be pretty creative if I could come up with all of those questionnaires. But the level of functioning that a person has, their activities of daily living, there's a whole network of documentation that have been tried and true. I pulled the ones that I feel are the most accurate, the easiest to administer, and the most timely, because we all have been trying. I'll give you an example, medical, the MMSE, which is testing people's memory and their ability to think. And, doctors use it. There's a 10-question. Sometimes they let their little assistants do it. And, we say, okay, now we know if they have a cognitive problem. Well, not really. All that tells us is get your parent to a neurologist. Hopefully they will refer to a neurologist. But in the course of that MMSE, the mini mental status exam, there have been other exams that have usurped the quality of that. Your MOCA, and I think I have that in there. MOCA really is the one that can tell most people if they are having a problem in thinking. The memory is the mini mental status exam. So I'm putting in those kinds of guidelines, those kinds of questionnaires. The depression, there's a questionnaire on depression. Oh God, if I had that knowledge and that skill and that ability to do that kind of research, I would feel quite proud. But I had to get that from, a whole cadre of research done by professionals in that field. And it's watered down for you, not by me, but by the group that is trying to make sure everybody is aware. Is this depression? Is it not depression? In a way that is easy to administer. So that's why I selected that. It's easier to administer. But if you see that the scoring is going south on your parent, you don't have to do anything about it other than to go to the doctor with your parent and say, look at what I've got here. Look at what I've got on these scoring for the MOCA, for the MMSE.
Wow.
Here's something that I want you to know when I'm talking to them about, can they do their showers? Do they understand how, when I watch them, they're not doing their ADL safely? There's a document there that lets you actually categorize. Can they do it? Can they do it partially, or can they not do it at all? And if you find that you're coming up with, no, they're not doing it at all, or they're a little hazardous when they're doing it, take that information to your doctor, not to your doctor, to their doctor, and say, look, we're getting a picture here of what mom and dad are really functioning as. And they want to stay in their home. Here's their level of functioning. What are our options? Where could they be safely cared for? If they have the funding, in their home. If they don't have the funding, what kind of setting is out in the community that they can be cared for safely? That's what these forms were created for. And no, they didn't all come from my head. What they did was they came from my research. And if I've adjusted anything, it's for the purpose of making it easier to administer.
Wow. So you've brought in a multidisciplinary approach to this, all of these different experts. And now anyone that has your book actually has the same kind of tools and resources that these experts would use, but in a simpler format. And with that, they can then make these assessments and go to someone with something other than just their opinion. Like you said, ADL, activities of daily living. I believe earlier in our interview today, you talked about, like, if you call and said, something's wrong with dad, they just don't seem right.
Yeah.
Well, somebody could, dismiss that. But if you say, I've got this checklist here that I ran through and the scores are very low, and it is one of the official names that you mentioned that I don't remember, then that doctor or therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist is like, okay, let's assess this. Let's take a look at it, because now that carries a lot more weight than just somebody's personal observation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly right. And when you have these little documents that start leading you to an awareness of what's going on with your parent, again, I'm trying to say you don't have to be the one to define what their level of functioning is. It just leads you to the right group of people that can help you define that, and they'll go deeper for you. And they'll determine at that point, what is the care level need? What is the medication level need? Where are they in terms of their lifestyle? And how can we make them safe with quality of care? That should be our goal. How do we make our parents safe with quality of care? And it takes a whole team.
Yeah, you said that, earlier we talked a little bit about how some people are seeing our elderly as a burden rather than a resource. And I know that you've worked with families from all walks of life. Is there a particular moving example or story of how maybe someone used the guidance that is in your book to transform their approach to caregiving for someone they loved?
I'd like to say yes. And I'm sure that there have been many opportunities that we have borne the influence on getting the kind of care into a family that is needed, especially in the beginning stages of our assessment. Now, is your question when we do the assessment or when we give the book to somebody and watch them?
Oh no, I know that the book is relatively new, so there's not going to be, thousands of people that have used it yet, but what is in the book is you. You put your wisdom into that book.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking about here is an instance where you went into a situation for a family and you were able to educate maybe the caregiver or the kids or something, say something to them that kind of like flipped a switch, gave them an aha moment where they suddenly saw things differently. And then that kind of transformed how the experience went for their loved one because of the information that you shared with them.
I'd like to say absolutely yes. That's what our initial assessment is all about. It's designed to find out what's going on with your parent. It's also designed to educate you on understanding what's going on with your parent and what you can and cannot do about it. I could never stay in this whole arena of care if that switch didn't get flipped on more often than not. That would be that would be pretty depressing to me. But I do find that people who have actually come to this place and said, something's crazy here. I don't know what's going on. It's annoying me, or I'm upset, or I'm scared, or I'm sad. When they come to that place and they are now reaching out to talk to us, I think most people are capable of opening up their thinking a little bit. They may not like what they're hearing, because what it may mean is, oh boy, I have to get more involved and I've already got a pretty full plate. Or how do we do all this when I'm in Ohio and my parent is in Arizona, or vice versa? They may not like to hear what they're being told and what they're seeing in writing, because whenever an assessment is done, I'm saying, bring your documents to the doctor. We bring our documents and share them with both the client and the family, saying, here, everything's great here. This is where we need to get some help. So there is a plan of action that occurs after you do this assessment that gives you a sense of order on, this is a priority, this is not a priority. And that becomes more manageable then. That becomes more like, okay, I think we, together as a team, we can all do this. I see that a lot.
One of the things that I think people may worry about is the financial burden of, caring for an elderly one, an elderly loved one. What kind of practical advice does your book offer to help families navigate those challenges?
Yeah, the most important thing to remember is that no one has suggested and will suggest that you use your own money to take care of your elderly person. It's not my place to say that for anybody. My place is to say, find out what your family's assets are, your parents' assets are, and how can they be utilized to take care of your elderly person. And in some instances, that's more complicated than what I'm saying right now, because they hold many elderly people from their own experiences have decided you have to hold tight onto that knowledge. Of course, there's enough of them out there that don't hold tight enough. And by the time you get involved, you find that somebody's come in and wiped them out. So the fastest and quickest way to address any of the financial issues for your parent is to be transparent. Let your parent be clear that he needs to be transparent with you, or you can't help. But it just feels to me like if you can talk about the burden of the finances with your parent and with the rest of your family member, with their financial advisor, it will give you a better holding on how to plan the care and what's realistic and what isn't. It's not always going to be the best. And I've seen that a lot. They'll tell me, well, there's no money. I don't have it. They don't have it. What are we going to do about it? And so we look to the community resources to find out where they get their fiscal support. There's Medicaid. There's ARP that can provide some discounts. There's church groups that will provide help. And it's amazing how when you start looking around and saying, would you please help us? We don't have what it takes to get the kind of care in place that's needed. Where can I find it? Who's going to help me advocate for this? The groups I just talked about, the federal, the city, the churches, these are places where you will find programs that can help you. And if you need somebody to help you locate who those are, what they are, I think in my book I have sources that you can go to, and you just have to drill it down to your particular state or your particular city. But nonetheless, it is the area that you can get some financial support.
Yeah. Well, and again, all of those resources and that guidance is contained in your book.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, part of what I do with my guests on this show is, we talk about being a hero to people in your life and being a hero in your own life. And as we're coming to the end here, I'm wondering, what do you hope that readers take away from your book?
An awareness that, first of all, that elderly person has needs that they may not tell you about or define. So I'm hoping that book will give you a tool to help you discover how to best meet the needs of your parent as well as yourself, because that brings you then, I think that elevates you then to a much healthier, actualized person. And I would like to have people feel good about themselves. It feels wonderful to be a support to a person in need. And your parent may not always have been the best, or they were the best. What makes you feel good about helping them is that you are in the category of heroes. Kindness does have a way of returning.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Some people find themselves in the position of caring for a parent who they may not have had a great relationship with, who they may have been extremely grateful to get away from at some point in their life. And now they feel thrust back into this position where nobody else is there to take care of it, and they feel like they have to, right?
No, they don't have to. That's the whole point. And there's enough of those people out there that are very adamant, I don't have to do it. The only thing that they have to do is to recognize that there are resources that can help that family member, that parent, so that you can dust your hands and say, okay, I've been an honorable child, but I'm not going to be a child that is stuck until their death helping them. Just all they have to do is connect their parent to the right resource. It doesn't have to be them. There's a lot of people, though, I will tell you this, that when they do contact us, our goal is not just to help that elderly person, it's to help that family member. Because as you're talking with them, you can hear their trauma, that there's been some deep disturbance in that relationship. And our goal is, if we can find the path to help them get to forgiveness and actually spend the end time with their family member without being so angry with them, more understanding that what happened was then, what is now within their control. I feel like I've done a good job from both ends of the caregiving system, the elderly person and the person providing the care.
So your book is a resource that's going to help anyone, no matter where their mindset is, where their heart is, where their ability is to make decisions about caring for their aging parent or another loved one. That's fantastic.
I think it can, if you're motivated to pick up that book, that's like a little ray of hope for me, for that elderly person.
I know firsthand it really is the title, A Compassionate Journey, the definitive guide to providing effective, loving care for your aging parent. It really is a definitive guide, in my judgment. So, you're a hero in my book, Barbara. Well done. I know your book's going to make a difference in countless lives.
Oh, that makes me feel good. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. How do you feel about maybe the possibility of this broadening the conversation about the need for elder care and the respect for elderly in society?
Well, October 9th is ageism awareness. And we are all discovering how embarrassingly closed this society is to aging and to the elderly. And I would like very much for most of us to look at that and say, look at a person of age, talk to them. you may find that they have something to say. I don't care if you read the book or not. You need to just start talking to the elderly, start engaging with the elderly. You may find that you have more help coming from that level of society than you ever thought you were going to have. I don't know if that's answering the question you asked me, but it is a question that I feel people need to hear. They need to know that ageism, we thought it was going to get better, and we're not quite sure if it was because of COVID and all the rush for managing just, a very small amount of healthcare resources, or if it's just that we are not still moving beyond ourselves. And I don't know how a society survives without moving beyond themselves. It's a give and take world, and it should be a positive give and take world,
Well, October 9th just happens to be my birthday. So that's, I feel honored that my birthday happens to fall on a day where, something so noble is being recognized. The last question that I want to ask you, Barbara, is who right now in your life is it that you wake up every day and want to be a hero to?
This is going to be an interesting question. Frankly, I wake up every morning to a little rough collie, 5-year-old rough collie, who I know that I get more from her than I give to her. But I want to do the right things for this little rough collie because their vulnerability and her innocence is so profound to me that it gets me started in the day. I feed her, we go play, we go for a walk, we talk. It's amazing how dogs will just look at you as though they understand every word you're saying. And I need that because once I go out the door and she goes out the door with me to the office, we are no longer looking at what I need. We are now looking at, okay, who's got the priority now today that I need to pay attention to? And I have the energy to do that. And I give a lot of that to the kindness and the involvement of my pet. I wish everybody had a pet because I think that does more for them. It doesn't have to be a dog. It could be a bird. My sister loved birds. I never did understand that. I don't know what they give her or what they gave her, but she just loves birds. Okay. All right. So she, that bird's tweeting and they're talking to each other. It doesn't matter what the animal is. What matters is that you have a creature that you love and that loves you back. And it's a wonderful way to start the day. Now, I didn't say a husband because I don't have one, but that might have been my first answer if I did. I'm a longtime widow. So my dog is very much my wake up partner in the morning.
That's beautiful. And as you were saying that, I thought your puppy's name is Hannah.
Oh, yes.
As you were saying that she gives you more than you give her.
I think so.
And I was thinking, it works the opposite direction with your clients. It seems like you give them more than they give you, but I don't know. Maybe it's the other way around. But Hannah's pouring love into you, fills you up, because then you go into your day and you pour it out into others.
Yeah. Although I will tell you, Tony, if you work with somebody long enough, or when you really hear somebody's story, and they offer you their trust, that's a fabulous feeling. It's a wonderful feeling. I had one little gal where the opportunistic caregiver tried to actually harm me to get me out of the house. And she walked me out the door and said, please come back. And I said, oh, you bet I will. Well, that's 2 years now that I've been involved with this gal, and she's been a pistol. But we got her medicated properly. We got her care needs done properly. And every time I come, I get the biggest hug from her, and she whispers, I love you. Now, what do you think that makes me feel like? That's quite...
Yeah.
I think I get more from her than she's getting from me now. So it can do a turnaround. It just depends.
Sure. That's great. All right. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your wisdom with us. And thank you so much for writing your book. For anyone listening, you can get the book on Amazon. You can get it at any major bookstore. You can also go to acompassionatejourney.com. There's an opportunity there for you to get a free sample chapter. The book comes in audio format, and also there's a forms book too. I just happen to have it here in the background. But this contains the forms that are actually in the book, the assessments, in 8.5 by 11 format. So you can fill them out in the book, or you can photocopy them. Makes it much easier to utilize. This forms book is available too. So I'll have all of those linked underneath this interview. And Barbara, if people want to get a hold of you, they can contact you through your website, which is Age Consultants, AGE Consultants.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
AGEconsultants.com. I'll have that linked underneath the interview as well.
Yeah.
And again, Barbara, thank you so much for your time and for being with us today. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wish I would have?
No, not at this point. I feel like we've had a nice conversation, and hopefully if there are more questions that need to be asked and answered, that we have another opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to do that. Well, thanks again. Thanks everyone for listening. And please check out Barbara's book. Tell anyone that you know who has parents, because at some point, the knowledge in this book is something you're going to need. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Thank you again, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Hero Up. I hope today's episode challenged you to step up as a hero in your field and provided you with valuable insights to express your unique voice and message. If you found this episode helpful and motivating, please leave a review and share it with your friends and family. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes and amazing guests. Until next time, find your voice, share your message, live your mission.